around we have built the small steps framework around the core activities that schools need to do during protracted conflict and crisis in order to deliver quality schooling. So during this presentation, I really hope that you will feel free to like post your questions in the chat. There is like a 30-minute like question and answer session um, at the end after the kind of presentation and like discussion exercise that we have planned. And so we have people who are like noting all of your questions, and we will try to come back to all the questions that you ask. I am now going to hand over to Cassandra to share with you about what protracted conflict and crisis looks like for one of our students.
Great. Thank you, Ira. Again, it's so great to see everyone here today. All right, so this, as you see his photo here, this is Messi. So he started school with us in 2020 during the height of COVID when Justice Rising had just opened a new school in his neighborhood. And he joined us when he was in about grade 4. And Messi started with us during a time of relative stability. That is until, of course, the eruption of Nyiragongo volcano in May 2021, which completely leveled the community and including 5 schools in the area and also our school, Powergrass. So when the community was allowed to return to the region, schooling temporarily resumed in the afternoons. And when it did, our students had to go to a neighboring host school, which was, they were studying in kind of this classroom you see here. It was dark, pretty cramped. And eventually we acquired some tents, as you can see. And we made them into classrooms on the part of our school's property that wasn't covered in volcanic rock. So the rest of the year was spent with them learning in those tents while we rebuilt the school next door. So at this point, we sat down with Messi, and he was in the 5th grade now, and he told us a bit more of his story. And as you can see, he says, I was always afraid when I had to go to school. Sometimes my parents forced me to go, even when I didn't want to. I'd fear being harassed again by my teacher when I couldn't answer well. I did not work well, and I did not do well in my classes. And in the end, I had to repeat 3rd grade. Since I started studying here at Powergrass, I learn easily, I grasp material in class, and I am not afraid of anything. There are times when I make a mistake, but my teacher corrects me without hitting me. So I bring myself to change so that he likes me even more. I know that I am going to succeed and finish my studies. So for his 6th and final grade of primary school, Messi was able to study in the rebuilt school that we had. That year, schooling again was disrupted by heightened insecurity this time from increased rebel activity in the area. So it was just one thing after another after another. However, at the end of that year, Messi sat for his primary school exit exams, and he ranked 2nd in his class with a score of 76%, passing together with all of his classmates. So throughout his time at Justice Rising School, whether he was attending a brand new school, a neighboring school, a tent, or his rebuilt school, Messi was safe, motivated, and learning at school. So safe that it turned his always afraid into not afraid of anything. So motivated that it turned his not wanting to go to school into a declaration of confidence about succeeding in his studies, and learning so much that it turned his failing 3rd grade into coming in 2nd in his class in the national primary exit exams, and all together with his classmates, of whom every one of them passed. So at Justice Rising, we believe even for children who grew up amidst protracted conflict and crisis, that they can be safe, motivated, and learning, and that in order to do their schools also need to be legitimate and sustainable. So these 5 domains come together to make up our smallest domain, and these domains are mutually reinforcing and dependent.
All right, great. I'm going to share a little bit about SMALL to dive a little bit deeper. So by leaning into the available research on what works in education in conflict and crisis settings and behavioral science, Alongside our experience, we've really distilled our thinking into the small steps approach, through which we seek to guide teachers, school leaders, and operators with small, manageable steps that will ensure their students are safe, motivated, and learning at school. For each domain, we have drivers and small steps that all build towards creating a culture of peace and protection, building and sustaining high motivation, steadily improving teaching, ensuring compliance and community acceptance, and managing finances in a cost-effective way. With that said, while small steps can provide much needed support to overwhelmed school teachers, operators, and leaders, it's really important to note what exactly small steps are and what they are not. Small steps are not a comprehensive school management plan. They're not meant to be rigid or overly prescriptive. It's not a curriculum that dictates what is learned and when. But on the other hand, small steps are a streamlined, human-centered framework for guiding quality schooling. They're flexible and adaptive to local realities. They're a guided approach to school capacity building and focus on how teaching and learning happen. Small steps are really built on existing global education research on behavioral science and habit formation, as well as our existing practice based on our day-to-day operations of our school network at Justice Rising. From the outset, we've really intended to create tools that are easy to adopt and adhere to. So how is SMALS implemented in school networks? As we start to engage new partners, we'll first start by conducting a small steps co-audit, which will give us and the partner an understanding of their current practice and how it stacks up compared to the small steps framework. Based on that audit, we'll co-develop a school network improvement plan, which will lay out a roadmap and timeline for improving their practice. From there, we'll pull from a catalog of tools such as the Chalkboard Guides, which is our structured pedagogy tool, which many of you are already familiar with. We're also developing a lean assessment tool alongside inspiring teachers. We also have a financial management tool that's currently in process and other tools that are yet to be developed to ultimately provide a modular and customizable approach to school improvement. As we implement these various tools, all of that data will roll up into our SMALS dashboard, which will give both Justice Rising and the operator actionable information to make the necessary changes to continue improving their schools.
What we want to achieve with SMALS is to be able to reach every student in protracted conflict and crisis with quality schoolings. And we have 3 C's that we need to build in order to do that. The first one is building capacity. So for capacity building, we will provide hand-in-hand technical support, just like Edison has kind of shown and outlined for you, for partner school networks to take small steps to quality schooling. From that capacity building, we will collect learnings to build consensus by generating evidence on what works and what doesn't work to improve schooling in these protracted conflict and crisis settings. We think that there is limited available evidence at the moment, and we are really committed to contributing to that. Building community enables both capacity and consensus building, as we will look to connect school operators and leaders across protracted conflict and crisis settings for ongoing peer support, as well as connecting practitioners with researchers. But what are small steps, and what is in the small steps framework? The small steps framework is made up of 5 domains, as you've seen, which are made, each one of them are made up of 3 or 4 drivers that do what they say. They drive that domain, they drive that outcome. Each of these drivers are then broken down into small steps that are targeted at school operators and leaders and teachers. In the next 20 minutes, what I want to do is give you a taster of this framework by leading us through a personal small steps reflection on the first 3 domains of SMALS. That's safe, motivated, and learning. So here we have those 3 domains, the overarching goals, and then the drivers. And this is where we're going to get interactive. So, and I want to find the chat. Here we go. So if you think back to your schooling experience, can you first of all share with us in the chat box, where did it take place? And was it a broadly secure or insecure setting?
Sorry, Ira, could you please repeat the question?
Yeah, of course, Eve. Where did you go to school? And was it in a broadly secure or stable setting, or was it an insecure, unstable setting?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we've got 2 continents so far. We've got Richmond, Virginia. 2 of you have been to school in the UK. I went to school in a very secure setting, but cold in the UK. Okay, here we go. A little bit of difference. We've got Kenya. For those of you who don't know where Minembwe is, that is in the eastern part of the DRC. Not secure in Delhi. Indiana, US. We have Cameroon. We have some of you who went to school in a refugee camp. Very insecure in Uganda. In Rwanda, South Africa, Houston. I just want to acknowledge the diversity of experience in terms of schooling and where we all went to school that is in the room here. And thank you for sharing all of that in the chat. So now I want you to think about safe, motivated, and learning. And for each of those, before we go into any of the drivers, I just want you to give it a number on a scale of 1 to 10 in answer to the question. Like for safe, how safe did you feel at school? If you think broadly over your schooling experience, how safe did you feel? With 1 being that you felt very unsafe most of the time, to 10 being that you felt very safe pretty much all of the time. You don't need to share, those scores are really personal and you don't need to share them in the chat, but it'd be really great if you could just write them down. So that's for safety. In terms of motivated, how motivated were you at school? Did you ever need to be forced to go to school like Messi? Was it for the same reasons, for different reasons? 10 again being like you're always very motivated to be at school, always really motivated to learn, and 1 being like you just never ever wanted to go. It's the last place on earth that you wanted to be. And then for learning, again on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being that you learned really well at school, your kind of schooling experience facilitated your learning really well. That would be 10, and 1 being that you don't feel that you learned well at school. Again, I can see some of you sharing on the chat. If you feel comfortable to do that, like you're free to do so. But it's just more important that you have it for your like personal reflection as we go through this activity. Would it be possible just to give me like a thumbs up to see if you have your scores? Thanks, Bailey. I see your thumbs up. Ursula, I see yours. Grace, thank you. Global Schools Forum, I don't know who you are, but thanks for your thumbs up. Alvin, thank you. Noreen, great. Lucy, thank you. I'm sorry if I've missed yours. Romana, thank you. I'm sorry if I've missed yours because I'm like juggling between screens. Zoom user, I don't know what your name is, but I do see your thumbs up. Thank you. Oh, and I see some in the chat as well. So I think we're roughly there, and I'm going to now dive deeper into each domain. So if we look at safety and you just look at your safety score, now I want you to think about the role of routines at school. How did routines make you feel safe at school? If you had strong routines at school, and I'm thinking of things like how you walk, so transitions, routines will take you through transitions from class to class, or routines of like how you return to class after break time, or is it recess, or is it playtime? I don't know what it's called in your context. Things that happen on a regular basis. How did routines make you feel safe? And if you didn't have, if you did have strong routines at school and you can remember vividly, like being behind somebody in the line or like going forward, like and marching around the school or whatever you did, if you had taken those routines away, what impact would that have on your overall score of how safe you felt at school? If there was no organization of how to move large groups of students from place to place, for example, how safe would you have felt? And just maybe make a note of that. And now when you think about your teachers, what did your teachers do that made you feel safe? What did your teachers do if they made you feel unsafe? Again, there is no pressure for anyone to share at this point. It's just for you to reflect on. What impact did having positive relationships with your teachers have on how safe you felt at school? How would it change your score? And then I want to really zero in on recess, break time, playtime. I hope that covers it for most people. What if that time was unsupervised for you? Maybe it was unsupervised. What would have been the impact of introducing supervision? Would it have had an impact on bullying? Okay, I want to pause there and just take, feel free to share reflections. Again, only share like what you feel safe and comfortable to share. It would be awful if, yeah, I don't want anyone to feel pressure to share anything that feels too personal, because feeling safe is a very personal thing. But if you want to come on mic and share anything or share in the chat, it would, yeah, I would love to hear from you, like your reflections. And thank you, Bailey and Alvin, for what you've shared so far. I'm just trying to read it. Yes, Lucy. You have your hand raised, but you are on mute. Can you unmute and share? I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Sorry, thanks for reminding me about that. Now, I'm based in Kenya. I work with Opportunity National. My studies were in Kenya. I studied in a far place from my birthplace. Growing up as an orphan, I was raised by a guardian, my aunt, from the father's side. So I was kind of a minority in the school because they considered me a foreigner in their place. So there was some sort of bullying out of that. So the teachers was a good performer in class. And so teachers tended to like me a lot. And not just like me a lot. The teachers were there for all the learners, but very keen on cases of bullying. So that gave me courage to not go to school fearing, because again, the teachers were affable. You could express yourself freely without fear of any victimization or accusations from any corners. And then again, breaks were breaks in between the lunches, breaks between classes, games times. They were supervised by teachers on duty, teacher assistants. So because the school was a bit big and there's always somewhat a problem or a challenge with big populations. So they were always supervised to ensure that there were no problems coming up from within the student body or from any corner, because also we were closer to some roads that villagers were using to access to wherever they were going to. So that gave me conviction and a justification to always go to school, and a peace of mind that somebody would listen or take care of my case or address my concern if it arises. I, of course, struggled with the history as a subject, and I didn't like it so much. So that made some history teachers not to like me, and you know, they would tease me in class. You see, you perform so well in mathematics and science, but you don't in history. So what is wrong with you? Sometimes it wasn't good, so it would spill again to the learners. You know, they go calling you names and making fun of you to some extent. But all in all, the learning experience in the schools was made comfortable for me by the teachers. And I also ended up being a prefect all my life in school. So also the cohesion of the student body also made it work for me. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I loved the phrase that you used, affable teachers, that they were there and like you could talk to them and they would listen to you. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Eve, I know you've come off mute. Do you want to share?
Yes, of course. Yeah, thank you, first of all, to give me this space. And I would like to address, first of all, my thanks to Justice Rising for organizing this spotlight, which is very interesting. I prefer to share my thoughts, not only because of this space, but because Justice Rising and UJFIM organization, we have two things in common, I think. We are all members of GSF, and we are also working in alike environments, which are very, very complicated, mined with conflict. So when I saw this spotlight, I thought that Justice Rising is bringing up a new methodology of better intervening in conflict area or zones. But I can see that the approach, which is small, is referred to the environment in the school. I thought that this approach will go beyond the school, the school environment. How, for example, to address issues of children who are aborting the school because of conflict, or some students who are going having pregnancy because they don't have how to reach the school. I thought that would be the debate, but I can see that we are talking about the environment at the school, which is not bad at all. And that's why I want also to share my thought about this. So the environment in which I grew up is a remote one in a village where most of the schools are not safe because teachers don't develop these issues of protecting children. Instead of showing love and kindness, they are very rigorous and they are very, very, very intimidating. They don't, the relation in brief, the relation between the student and the teacher is not a relation that can encourage a student to follow. But we understand that it is how it is built. And for me personally, I was motivated to go in spite of those discouragement toward my teachers. But on the other side, parents were very, very motivated and involved me to go to school. So without taking much time, that is the environment in which I grew up. And thanks to God, I'm where I am today. Thank you very much, Ira.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you, Eve, for sharing that. Thank you to all of you who have shared in the chat as well about the different things that made you feel safe or not at school. And I guess before I move on to motivated, I just want to ask a question, which relates a bit to what Annabella shared in the chat. Like, what if school was the only place that you could feel safe, and the external environment from which you're coming from is one that is very challenging and chaotic and unpredictable? We think that it's possible to have a huge impact on a sense of security for a child if, even growing up in conflict and crisis, if they can come to school and feel safe every day and know that they're going to be safe there and that they're with safe people there. So now going on to motivated. Did you feel overall like motivated to go to school? What contributed to that? Maybe you had a sibling who really excelled in their learning and they were inspiring to you. Maybe that was a friend. Did your parents inspire you to go to school? Was there a teacher that you really liked at school that you wanted to be around? Were all of your teachers motivated at school? Did they want to be there? Did they want to teach? If you can think of maybe two contrasting teachers, one who really wanted to be there and was clearly passionate about the job they were doing, and one that was less motivated, then what was the difference in being taught by both of those teachers? This is a really, I realize, then my next question is very leading, but if you think of your favorite teacher, were they motivated? And then to go through those drivers, I guess I've kind of touched on like recruiting the right teachers. By that we mean like teachers who want to teach, just people who want to be there. There's some intrinsic motivation to be there. What if your teacher wasn't paid regularly? What difference do you think that would make to their levels of motivation? And what if they came to work in a really poor working environment with a very poor sense of team? What impact would that have? So yeah, it would be really great to just hear a couple of reflections at this point. Alvin, I saw your hand up and now it's gone down.
Yes, my hand was up, and let me share. So I'm all the way from Cameroon, and I attended a mission school that is a Presbyterian school. And I grew up with my grandparents. My grandfather was a teacher. So there's always this belief where I come from that you cannot be a teacher's child and you don't go to school, or at least to a certain level. So that already was a sign. But majority of the teachers in mission schools, they are one of those teachers that are the least paid in my locality. So they do it from their heart. Like they don't consider it a job. They consider it like a calling because they know the children they are teaching. They know the children they are teaching. It's like an uncle teaching the other brother's child. So that feeling of knowing that I am teaching family was, I think, one of the driving forces that motivated teachers, because if we want to talk about the pay, they had one of, even up till now, mission school teachers in my country still earn very little compared to what the teachers in the public sector, or the teachers employed by the government, what they do. It's easier for a teacher that is employed by the government to, even if there's a salary delay, to not come to school, because even the way their attendance, or yes, the way their attendance registered are being checked is not as rigorous as in mission or private schools. So in private schools or in mission schools, teachers are paid according to the number of days or hours put in work. So the control is really rigorous. But despite that, they still earn very little. And just the fact that they are teaching the community, that motivation was there. It's easier for government school teachers to be, maybe you are picked from one community and transferred to another community. But generally what we had in those days, we had teachers who were from our communities teaching us in our community. So they had that extra motivation to teach us. That is just what I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Alvin. That it's really insightful to hear, like, where it's not salary, like where does that motivation come from for teachers? Thank you so much for sharing that. Ntakamaze?
Okay, thank you so much. So I come from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, but for the last 26 years, I've lived in Uganda as a refugee, where I'm currently working with the CIOTA to provide access to quality education for children who are affected by armed conflicts from Congo, South Sudan, Rwanda, and Burundi. So as a child, I did attend both primary and secondary schools in the refugee settings, where teachers' salaries came after like 3-6 months sometimes. And then the environment itself not being supportive, both within the school, for example, the way teachers were treated by head teachers, or the people who were paying the salaries, and also refugee parents having so many needs. Children had to walk long distances to access the only few schools in the refugee camp. So the environment wasn't motivating for teachers if you were also to teach like 200 kids in one classroom. So, but apart from, besides those challenging situations, I had 2 examples. One of a teacher who was really not motivating me to attend class. He was my math teacher, my mathematics teacher. He used to harass us when we don't give like correct responses to his questions in classroom. And I remember one time he almost poked me in the eye with a pair of compass when he was teaching. I was sitting in front. So every time I went to his class, I was not motivated. And then there was this other South Sudanese teacher called Otim, who was teaching social studies. He really motivated all of us to work hard despite the conditions in which we were. And then the other motivation came from my parents. So my dad kept saying that there is nothing we can give you out of this refugee camp. You have to work hard and acquire education. So I always went to school knowing that there are challenges, but that hope of acquiring education, which I will use to help me in the future, kept me moving. So thank you so much. That is what I wanted to share.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing from your experiences. Like, we have so much to learn from listening to experiences like yours. And thank you as well, Bailey, for what you shared about motivation in the chat box. I think there's a lot to think about there in terms of like where motivation comes from, and like all of the different stakeholders that have a part to play there. I just want to get on to learning and ask some questions for you. What was it that made the biggest difference to help you learn at school? And in some ways, Ntakamaze has already like referred to that in terms of like a teacher who really motivated him to learn, not in maths, but the social science teacher. What or who made the biggest difference? What did you learn best in? Did it have anything to do with that being your favorite teacher? Or did it have nothing to do with that? And then to ask another question, did your school operate a timetable? Did you ever experience there not being a timetable and what impact that has on learning? Did you ever feel like you were learning too much of one thing but not another? Can you imagine if you didn't have an effective timetable, then what impact would that have on your overall score for how well you learn at school? And did you feel like you were being assessed on things that were going to help you learn? So it'd be great just to take a few reflections at this point as well on learning. We are like fairly short now on time, but I do really want to maybe just like two people. Abdi, would you like to share? What helped you learn most at school?
Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. I'm Abdi Dahir from Excellence Education Network. When it comes to sharing personal thoughts, ideas, and values, the background in which each one of us has studied level. Myself, I'm a case study. I went to school in an environment where my parents were not. I went from Somalia to Kenya. I just boarded the vehicle going to Kenya just to study by the advice of a colleague. So in Kenya, absolutely there were relatives, but myself, I felt very safe in school. And at primary level, I used to spend and sleep in the school. It was quite safe. I had an interaction with the school guidance, the school the watchman, the bus, the school admin, the principal, because I was academically talented. They had that confidence that I will make no troubles in school. So I had to spend the night in school just studying. Of course, sometimes I used to go out, but in the evening I used to come back. At secondary level, the same. So, of course, motivations are there for students who are academically talented. I was close to my teachers just because of my academic performance and discipline. I always got motivated by the school principal, by my class teachers, by subject teachers. I remember in first and foremost, I was leading. I was number one. And the school closure day, I was invited. I was called as a first student in the whole stream, and then followed by as best subject student. That's how it was. Then I was awarded, like I was leading like 6 more subjects. I was the best student in 6 subjects in the final exam. So, will you believe that if I tell you that I never used to buy books, I used to keep the books, I used to keep the books I'm always given for the next term. Then if I don't secure position 1, I will fight to get position 2. That was my academic, journey throughout primary, secondary. So if I don't get, number 1 gets an access to so many books, maybe stationery, like whatever, those mathematical materials. Then number 2. So if I don't secure position 1, I used to secure position 2. So those books I used to reserve them for the next term. So I never had parents around. I never had to call them because they were far away distance from me. After all, school was the best environment that I lived in, partially because I hadn't used to go home. To relatives that I was mainly depending on for food, for shelter. But majorly, I used to spend most of my time in school, day and night. Then if I go home for feeding, whatever, then I used to spend, even weekends, I used to spend in school. Because the school I was running was just a day school. So about the timetable, of course, school is run with timetable. I remember we all had a timetable. Piece of the timetable in our school, in our classroom. So that was a guidance. So motivation to students, to teachers were different because the student motivation is determined by the effort that the student puts in that school. The student is just a rider, he will get less motivated, even though school is a protected environment where it does provide maximum protection to students' safety, whatever. But specific motivations is given to students that are talented, students that are committed to study, students that do respect the teachers, students that are time conscious, well disciplined, to do their assignments. So those ones are always motivated. Teachers' motivation to us. To the schools where I went, the teachers were different. There were those that were employed by government, those that were employed by NGOs, those that were paid by the local community. So those that were paid by the local community had a lesser salary, less motivated, although they were a little bit, they were little bit encouraging themselves, but they had lesser success than those paid by the government and by the business. So they used to be called the UTs, untrained teachers, UTs. So that was a terminology. They were a little bit conversing with the way of teaching to say because I copied from their teachers at secondary level, but they never had that. So those kind of motivations were common in that school, I remember. and then the complaint coming from the students or maybe from themselves, requesting for teaching methodology trainings for Scrum. After all, that was the environment I studied. I thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Abdi. I feel like you've covered so much there in terms of like the different kinds of teachers that there are, like the trained and untrained teachers, how much we need to help teachers improve. There are bits of it that I couldn't catch, but thankfully we're being recorded and captioning is on, so we can go back to go through it. I'm going to stop sharing at this point and just come into the room to, I guess, just summarize that, like, these are the kind of small steps that we see, like where we see opportunities woven throughout school activities, which are so dynamic with so many different stakeholders who are playing a part at different times and influence it even from outside of school. And these are the key drivers that we think can drive the possibility of children being safe, motivated, and learning at school. We would love to pause now for any questions that you might have, and I'm going to hand back to Steph to facilitate that part of the spotlight.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Ira and Cassandra and Edison. That was so great. And I think we could have carried on going for even longer. But we'll hand over to everybody for a question and answer or discussion section. Feel free to carry on the conversation a bit now if you like. But very briefly, before we move into taking questions, could I just kindly ask if it's possible to just turn your camera on just for a couple of seconds so we could take a quick screen grab, and then we have a photograph for our newsletter, if you wouldn't mind. I'll give everyone a couple of seconds just to turn on. Thank you so much. And there's several of us, which is great. We've got such a good turnout. It's great to see everybody. Okay, I've taken about 8, so I think there should be one good one. Okay, I'm going to pass back to Ira, and I'm going to have a look in the chat. I don't think we've had any questions in there so far, but drop them in if you've got one now, or just shout out. Feel free to unmute. We've got about 15 minutes or so for questions, and then I'll get things wrapped up. And if you don't have time to ask a question today, or you prefer to just do that privately, we will share contact details at the end, so don't worry, you'll have a chance after the session to ask questions too. Would anyone like to kick us off?
Also, I love seeing your faces. If you want to keep your camera on, that would be great. It was really nice to see you. Yes, I think it might be Ashti. Is it Ashti?
Hi, yeah, it is. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks so much. What a great presentation. I really, really enjoyed the interactive nature of the conversation, because it just made me think so much more deeply about this issue. I just wondered if you guys could comment a little bit on the journey that Justice Rising is on, more broadly speaking, from running your own schools to thinking about the small program, and what you sort of, what your goals are maybe for the next couple of years. I'd just love to hear sort of how you got to this and where you want to go. I hope that was clear. Sorry, I'm in a bit of a noisy place.
Yeah, that was really clear. Edison, do you want to take that question?
Sure, I can answer that. And so, obviously we've been operating our school network for some time now. We first started, we registered as an organization back in 2015. And so we've spent all this time building out and operating our internal school network. But I think even from the outset, the long-term strategy has always been, how do we take some of the key lessons and pillars that we are implementing, and based on our existing practice within our schools, and how do we kind of distill that into something that's way more scalable. I think one of the kind of key kind of considerations for us, and one of the key design constraints that we applied to our work was how do we deliver learning outcomes that far outpace national averages and what the public schools are able to deliver, but at the same cost basis. So on a cost per pupil basis, we wanted to be able to deliver education that would deliver better results. And so I think for us, with our 23 school network, we have about 4,000 students. But when you kind of step out and zoom out a little bit, there are about over 3 million kids just in the Congo that currently cannot access school or education due to conflict or different crisis kind of related situations. And so our 23 schools, as great as they are, and I certainly don't want to diminish what we've been able to accomplish to this point, but it's not going to lead ultimately to systemic change or how schools are delivered or how schools are run in some of these really challenging settings. And so I think building schools are also inherently capital intensive. I know that there are people in this group alone that probably are very familiar with that, running your own school networks. But it's also really challenging to kind of scale up in that sense. So we wanted to create a framework that would more broadly address the issues of quality schooling in these protracted conflict settings.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful.
Thanks. I think Eve was it the next question, and then we'll respond to Annabelle. In fact, let's take Eve's question, Alvin's question, and Annabelle's question, and then we'll answer them. So we'll take the 3 questions.
Yeah, thank you, Ira. Thank you for giving me the space to ask my question. I saw in your presentation, you showed us a triangle of 3 components. The first one was about the building capacity.
Yeah.
Second one was about building sensors, I think, and the last one was about building community.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to more understand how this works. How you build the community, how you build the capacity. Is it the capacity of students or teachers, or both of them? The community you are addressing, is it the parent of students or other schools? And the last one, it is a suggestion, which this approach can be also implemented in our schools, as we have the same context. We are working in the same context. So if this approach has produced impact, good impact, I think so. We wish we can also produce the same impact. So wish you can share it with us. And I think that you already planned it.
Thank you, Eve.
Thank you. Yeah,
Thank you. Alvin, your question.
All right. Thank you so much, Justice Rising, for this opportunity. I noted with a lot of interest about your schools, and what piqued me the most was the nature of your syllabus. If you actually create something totally new, or you adapt to the existing school syllabuses wherever in whichever country you go, because like in our country, we have I think one of the reasons why a lot of students are not so productive even after school is because we have a kind of outdated syllabus. Because I still believe that if you use, no matter whatever intervention you use to evaluate or to try to improve an outdated syllabus, a syllabus that is not targeting the current realities, I think the students, the level of attainment will still be low. So this is just one of the questions. I think my brother just previously asked some of the worries I wanted to tell you. So I'll end here for now.
Yeah, thank you. I can definitely take the syllabus curriculum question. And in terms of Annabelle's question of how we use smalls and that initial evaluative stage and then ongoing improvement. I can probably take all three questions. And Edison, Cass, are you okay? Cass is like it. So from like the most specific one, so I'm going to go to Alvin's and Annabelle's and then Eve's question. So in terms of syllabus and curriculum, what we find, and this is part of like legitimacy and that domain, is that it's really important to our stakeholders that we use what is seen to be the most legitimate curriculum or syllabus in the context. And so even if it means that, as Alvin, you were saying, we could go into a context where the syllabus might be seen as by some people as being outdated, if it's the syllabus that the government have mandated that needs to be in use in schools, then we will use that syllabus. But what we will do is look at how to maximize the kind of learning potential out of the syllabus that there is, but always like kind of submitting ourselves to the constraints of what is in play, because that legitimacy piece is really important to our stakeholders. And like a possible risk if we weren't to do that is that the schools could be shut down, for example. The second question from Annabelle, I think, was so we have done this once already in our own schools in terms of like how we've implemented that like initial diagnostic or evaluative stage, and that looked like a 2-day workshop during which we both introduced and did almost like an audit or an inquiry of our of all the small steps and how we're like which ones we do, which ones we don't do, which ones we do some of the time or in some schools but not all, like not everywhere. And we used that to develop a school network improvement plan and to prioritize. We prioritized 5. We're finding maybe 5 is too many to go after all at one go, but you prioritize like key small steps that we're really going to look to implement and embed across the network over a set period of time. And we set ourselves a period of time of a year. And so there are lots of small steps, and that would be far too overwhelming to actually deliver meaningful change with. And so the idea is that you use the framework as a diagnostic to then prioritize, like what are like the 3 things maybe that we really want to go after this year at a small step level, and then we go and we build the plan around that. And the 3C question, in terms of Eve, capacity, consensus, and community building. For capacity, we're talking about the capacity of the school operators, leaders, and teachers, and that kind of system, which we think if you can influence that school system, then it can influence the kind of outcomes of students, and they will build student capacity themselves. And then the community that we're talking about is a community of school operators across protracted conflict and crisis settings. For example, like between school leaders at UGAFE and school leaders maybe at Justice Rising, or schools that FPENS are supporting, so that people can draw on like mutual experiences, but then also bringing research and practice together. So researchers and practitioners, which means again school operators, school leaders, so that there's really effective collaboration and evidence generation. I saw a question. Did anyone manage? It's a question from Nick. Framework looks great. Thank you. Could you draw a bit more what we see as most different versus Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question in terms of almost like the transferability of it. Like, is this just about conflict settings or kind of work everywhere? And I know that Kizazi have also helped us to think about like how transferable this is like to a relatively or just a more stable setting. I won't say relatively stable. And I think in conversations, the legitimacy piece is something that is maybe slightly different. When it's more stable, people are more willing to like push boundaries or like push policy change, maybe, in a way that in conflict settings, it's like very high priority to be compliant and to be seen as legitimate, because of the fear of like someone just coming and shutting you down, or also like towing the line if you're like under kind of military rule, or if you're kind of coexisting with a rebel group, just making sure that you can carry on functioning is like a really high priority. And that leads to having to maybe compromise on things that you might not need to in a more stable setting. But I do agree with you that like the goals of education are broadly the same. I think that SMALS is broadly applicable if we are looking for those outcomes. Like, I would love for my own children to be safe, motivated, and learning at schools. So yeah, is there anything you want to add to that? I think a change of voice at this point would be great before we close.
No, thanks, Ira. I was just interested in that question, like what you actually were saying as universal versus unique, and also, in some ways the goals might be the same, but also there may be other things that kids in those contexts need that are different to kids growing up in other scenarios. And so how you were thinking about that, like the goals of purposes of education in these sorts of settings, as well as the kind of the how of education. But it's a great framework, and thanks so much for sharing.
No, thank you for that feedback. Those like big questions are always difficult to difficult and interesting and fun to grapple with, and important. Motivation, the chicken and the egg question of motivation and learning. I'm not going to bite. I think they're mutually reinforcing that motivation. If you're motivated, you're going to learn better, but if you learn well, it builds your motivation. So I think that's really important. But what we hear from our community is that safety is also has a big influence on how motivated you feel. So it's important to feel safe in class. Cassandra, Edison, is there anything you want to add before we hand back to Steph?
I'm not sure if there's anything I want to add to the questions or your answering. But again, just saying thank you to everyone for coming today. And so many of you have helped us in the early stages of really putting SMALS together and brainstorming, asking different questions. And so we're just really grateful for everyone's feedback and for taking the time today. So we hope we can continue the conversation together. And we're excited about where this leads, and to take you all on that journey with us. So thanks.
Not much for me to add to that, just to reiterate Cassandra's point. We really appreciate everyone being here. This has been super helpful and insightful for us, and I'm sure we'll be kind of pinging each one of you at some point to kind of gather and get further feedback from you all. But generally speaking, just really appreciate all of you being here today.
Me too. Back to you, Steph.
Thank you very much. That was great. And I'm going to share with you now some contact details. So if you would like to carry on the conversation, if you think of more questions, if you want to share a bit more about your own reflections with Justice Rising following the session, you'll see that Ira's email is on the screen. So please drop her a line. Or if you want to put your contact details in the chat now, please go ahead and we can facilitate any connections afterwards. But I want to say a big thank you to Justice Rising, and especially call you guys out, because I've only been at GSF now for about 6 months, but in every event that I've attended, whether it be something I've been running or a colleague, you're always there, you know, contributing to all our activities and like learning from our other community members, as well as proactively sharing your own work with our community and our wider network. So we really value that. So thank you for all the effort, because I know you've recently been in a community of practice with my colleague Ajay, and now you're in this. So thank you very much for sharing your insight and knowledge and encouraging people to share with you. If anyone would like to contact me, my email is on the screen also, and it's getting dropped in the chat. So do contact me to learn more about GSF and future spotlights. For anyone who's external, we'll add you to our newsletter list. So do let us know if you want to opt out. My colleague Mercy is just about to launch a poll. It's a very quick one. So if you could please fill that out before you go, we would greatly appreciate your feedback. And that's it from me. Just thank you for everyone who's joined us, and we really hope to see you in a future spotlight. I think we're bang on time now, but maybe if anyone had like a sneaky last comment or mini question or anything, I'm sure we could just take it as we go out as the background to the poll, if that's okay to launch that, Mercy. Did anyone have any final thoughts? No.
I'm really excited to see everybody that's here. I am really especially excited to meet some of you for the first time that we haven't met before, and just really wanted to encourage you, if we've not connected before, we would really love to connect with you. I know that there are people here that are from like Congolese-led organizations